What if I told you that most of what people say is irrelevant? That the words coming out of their mouths are often the least honest part of any conversation? The real story, the truth, isn't in what they say, it's in what their body does. Today, we're going on a deep dive into the human brain to unlock the silent language it's broadcasting every single second. We're going to learn how to separate the lies from the truth, not by being a human lie detector, but by understanding the fundamental conflict happening inside every one of us, the battle between our two brains. Now we're digging deep in the book What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro. So let's dig deep, and here we go. Interpret and intuit at a level unique to the human species. It is our critical and creative brain. It is also, however, the part of the brain that is least honest. Therefore, it is our lion brain, because it is capable of complex thought. This brain, unlike its limbic counterpart, is the least reliable of the three major brain components. This is the brain that can deceive, and it deceives often. Vrij 2003 117. Returning to our earlier example, while the limbic system may compel the millennial bomber to sweat profusely while being questioned by the customs officer, the neurocortex is quite capable of allowing him to lie about his true sentiments. The thinking part of the brain, which is the part that governs our speech, specifically Broca's area, could cause the bomber to say, "I have no explosives in the car." Should the officer inquire as to what is in his automobile, even if what claim, or even if that claim is an utter falsehood? The new cortex can easily permit us to tell a friend that we like her new haircut when we in fact do not. Or it can facilitate the very convincing statement, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." Because the new cortex, the thinking brain, is capable of dishonesty. It is not a good source of reliable or accurate information. In summary, when it comes to revealing honest nonverbal behaviors that helps us read people, the limbic system is the holy grail of body language. Thus, this is the area of the brain where we want to focus our attention. Our limbic responses, the three phases of nonverbals. One of the classic ways the limbic brain has assured our survival as a species and produced a reliable number of nonverbal tells in the process is by regulating our behavior when confronting danger, whether it be a prehistoric man facing a stone, age, beast, or a modern day employee facing a stone-hearted boss. Over the millennia, we have retained the competent, life-saving, visceral reactions of our animal heritage. In order to ensure our survival, the brain's very elegant response to distress or threats has taken three forms: freeze, flight, and fight. Like other animal species whose limbic brain protected them in this manner, humans processing these limbic reactions survived to propagate because these behaviors were already hardwired into our nervous system. I am sure that many of you are familiar with the phrase fight or flight response. which is common terminology used to describe the way in which we respond to threatening or dangerous situations. Unfortunately, this phrase is only two-thirds accurate and half-assed backward. In reality, the way animals, including humans, react to danger occurs in the following order: freeze, flight, fight. If the reaction really were fight or flight, most of us would be bruised, battered, and exhausted much of the time because we have retained and owned this exquisitely successful process for dealing with stress and danger, and because the resulting reaction reactions generate nonverbal behaviors that help us understand a person's thoughts, feelings, and intentions. It is well worth our time to examine each response in greater detail. The freeze response. A million years ago, as early hominids traversed the African savanna, they were faced with many predators that could outrun and overpower them. For early man to succeed, the limbic brain, which had evolved from our animal forebears, developed strategies to compensate for the power advantage our predators had over us. That strategy, or first defense of the limbic system, was to use the freeze response in the presence of a predator or other danger. Movement attracts attention by immediately holding still upon sensing a threat. The limbic brain caused us to react in the most effective manner possible to ensure our survival. Most animals, certainly most predators, react to and are attracted by movement. This ability to freeze in the face of danger makes sense. Many carnivores go after moving targets and exercise the chase, trip, and bite mechanism exhibited by large felines. The primary predators of our ancestors. Many animals not only freeze their motion when confronted by predators, but some even play dead, which is the ultimate freeze reaction. This is a strategy that opossums use, but they are not the only animals to do so. In fact, accounts of the school shoutings at Columbine Columbine and Virginia Tech demonstrate that students used the freeze response to deal with deadly predators. By holding still and playing dead, many students survived even though they were only a few feet away from the killer. Instinctively, the students adopted ancient behaviors that work very effectively. Freezing your movement can often can often make you nearly invisible to others, a phenomenon every soldier and SWAT team operator learns. Thus, the freeze response has been passed from primitive man to modern man and remains with us today as our first line of defense against a perceived threat or danger. In fact, you can still see this ancient limbic reaction to large felons in the theaters of Las Vegas, where big cats are part of the show. As the tiger or lion walks onto the stage, you can be sure that the people in the first row will not be making any unnecessary arm or hand gestures. They will be frozen in their seats. These people were not issued memos to remain still. They did so because the limbic brain has prepared the human species to behave that way in the face of danger for over 5 million years. In our modern society, the freeze response is employed more subtly in everyday life. You can observe it when people are caught bluffing or stealing, or sometimes when they are lying. When people feel threatened or exposed, they react just like our ancestors did a million years earlier. They freeze. Not only have we, as humans, learned to freeze in the face of observed or perceived danger, but others around us have learned to copy our behavior and freeze their behavior also, even without seeing the threat. This mimicry or isopraxism, same movement, involved because it was critical to communal survival as well as social harmony within the human species. This freezing action is sometimes termed the deer in the headlights effect. When suddenly caught in a potentially dangerous circumstance, we immediately freeze before taking action. In our day to day life, this freeze response manifests innocently, such as when a person walking down the street stops suddenly, perhaps hitting himself on the forehead with the palm of his hand before turning around and heading back to his apartment to turn off the stove. That momentary stop is enough for the brain to do some quick incision or assessing whether the threat comes in the form of a predator or of a thought remembered. Either way, the psyche must deal with a potential dangerous situation. We not only freeze when confronted by physical and visual threats, but as in the example of that late night doorbell, threats from things we hear, oral threats, can also alert the limbic system. For instance, when being chastised, most people hold very still. The same behavior is observed when an individual is being questioned and matters that he or she perceives could get them into trouble. The person will freeze in his chair as if in an ejector seat. A similar manifestation of the limbic freeze occurs during interviews. When people hold their breath or their breathing becomes very shallow. Again, this is a very ancient response to a threat. It is not noticed by the interviewee, and yet it is quite observable to anyone watching for it. I have often had to tell an interviewer to relax and take a deep breath during the middle of an interview or deposition, as he was unaware of just how shallow his breathing had come or had become, consistent with the need to freeze when confronted by a threat. People being questioned about a crime will often fix their feet in a position of security, interlocked behind the chair legs, and hold that position for an incoordinate period of time. When I see this type of behavior, it tells me something is wrong. This is a limbic response that needs to be further explored. The person may or may not be lying, since deceit cannot be directly discerned. But I can be assured from their nonverbal behavior that something is stressing them. Therefore, I will pursue the source of their discomfort through my questioning or interaction. Another way the limbic brain uses a modification of the freeze response is to attempt to protect us by diminishing our exposure during surveillance of shoplifters. One of the things that stands out is how often thieves will try to hide their physical presence by restricting their motions or hunching over as if trying to be invisible. Ironically, this makes them stand out even further since it is such a deviation from normal shopping behavior. Most people walk around a store with their arms quite active and their posture upright rather than stooped. Psychologically, the shoplifters or your son and daughter, as they try to sur- surreptitiously wipe a cookie from the pantry, are trying to master their environment by attempting to hide in the open. Another way people try to hide in the open is by limiting their head exposure. This is done by raising the shoulders and lowering the head. The turtle effect. Picture a losing football team walking off the field after the game, and you get the idea. Interesting and sadly, abused children often manifest these freezing limbic behaviors. In the presence of an abusive parent or adult, their arms will go dormant at their sides and they avoid eye contact as though that helps them not to be seen. In a way, they are hiding it in the open, which is a tool of survival for these helpless kids. One purpose of the freeze response is to avoid detection by dangerous predators or in dangerous situations. A second purpose is to give the threatened individual the opportunity to assess the situation and determine the best course of action to take, the flight response. When the freeze response is not adequate to eliminate the danger or is not the best course of action, example, the threat is too close, the second limbic response is to get away by use of the flight response. Obviously, the goal of this choice is to escape the threat or at a minimum to distance oneself from danger. Running, of course, is useful when it is practical. And as a survival mechanism, our brain directed our body to adopt this tactic judiciously over millennia in order to escape from danger. In our modern world, however, where we live in cities and not in the wild, it is difficult to run from threats. Therefore, we have adapted the flight response to meet our modern needs. The behaviors are not as obvious, but they serve the same purpose to either block or distance ourselves. If you think back on the social interactions you've had in your life, you'll probably be able to recall some of the evasive actions you took to distance yourself from the unwanted attention of others. Just as a child turns away from undesirable food at the dinner table and shifts her feet toward the exit, an individual may turn away from someone she doesn't like or to avoid conversations that threaten her. Blocking behaviors may manifest in the form of closing the eye, rubbing the eye, or placing the hands in front of the face. The person may also distance herself from someone by leaning away placing objects, a purse on her lap, or turning her feet toward the nearest exit. All of these behaviors are controlled by the limbic brain and indicate that someone wants distance from one or more undesirable persons or any perceived threat in their environment. Again, we undertake these behaviors because for millions of years humans have withdrawn from things we didn't like or that could harm us. Therefore, to this day, we expedite our exit from a deplorable party, distance ourselves from a bad relationship, or lean away from those who are deemed undesirable, or even with whom we strongly disagree. Just as a man may turn away from his date, an individual in negotiations may shift away from his counterpart if he bears an unattractive offer or feels threatened by bargaining continues. Blocking behaviors may also be manifested. The business person may close or rub his eyes or place his hands in front of his face. He may lean away from the table or the other person and turn his feet away as well, sometimes in the direction of the nearest exit. These are not behaviors of deception, but rather actions that signals that a person feels uncomfortable. These forms of the age-old flight response are distancing nonverbal behaviors that tell you the business person is unhappy with what is occurring at the table. The fight response. The fight response is the limbic brain's final tactic for survival through aggression. When a person confronting danger cannot avoid detection by freezing and cannot save himself by distancing or escaping flight, the only alternative left is to fight. In our evolution as a species, we, along with other mammals, developed the strategy of turning fear into rage in order to fight off attackers. In the modern world, however, acting on our rage may not be practical or even legal. So the limbic brain has developed other strategies beyond the more primitive physical fight response. One form of modern aggression is an argument, although the original meaning of the term argument relates simply to a debate or a discussion. The word is increasingly used to describe a verbal altercation. An overheated argument is essentially fighting by non physical means. The issue of insults or the use of insults, ad hominem phrases, counter allegations, denigration of professional stature, goading, and sarcasm are all in their own ways the modern equivalents of fighting because they are all forms of aggression. If you think about it, civil lawsuits can even be constructed or construed as a modern and socially sanctioned type of fight or aggression in which litigants aggressively argue to opposing viewpoints. While humans probably engage in physical altercations far less now than in other periods in our history, fighting is still a part of our limbic armory. Although some people are more prone to violence than others, our limbic response shows up in many ways other than punching, kicking, and biting. You can be very aggressive without physical contact. For example, just by using your posture, your eyes, by puffing out your chest, or by violating another's personal space. Threats to our personal space elicit a limbic response to an individual level. Interestingly, these territorial violations can also create limbic responses on a collective level. When one country intrudes into the space of another, it often results in economic sanctions, severing of diplomatic relations, or even wars. Obviously, it is easy to recognize when someone uses the fight response to commit a physical assault. What I want to identify for you are the not so obvious ways in which individuals exhibit some of the more subtle behaviors associated with the fight response, just as we have seen modified expressions of the freeze and flight limbic reactions. Modern decorum dictates that we refrain from acting on our primitive inclinations to fight when threatened. In general, I advise people to refrain from using aggression, verbal or physical, as a means of achieving their objectives, just as the fight response is the act of least resort in dealing with a threat, used only after the freeze and flight tactics have proven unworkable. So, too should you avoid it whenever feasible. Aside from the obvious legal and physical reasons for this recommendation, aggressive tactics can lead to emotional turmoil, making it difficult to concentrate and think clearly about the threatening situation at hand. When we are emotionally aroused, and a good fight will do that, it affects our ability to think effectively. This happens because our cognitive abilities are hijacked so that the limbic brain can have full use of all available cerebral resources. One of the best reasons for studying nonverbal behaviors is that they can sometimes warn you when a person intends to harm you physically, giving you time to avoid potential conflict. Now I'm going to move to some points that I took from those pages that I want to share with you. Part 1: the two brains' honest and dishonest signals. To understand body language, you first need to know that you have two brains fighting for control. First, there is the neurocortex. This is your thinking brain. It's the sophisticated, highly evolved part responsible for logic, language, and planning. It's what you're using to understand me right now. But there's the catch because it's so smart. The neurocortex, or the new cortex, is also a fantastic liar. It can craft stories, manipulate facts, and consciously deceive. Lying is hard work. It's two-part mental exercise. You have to suppress the truth, and then you have to invent and maintain a believable lie. Brain scans show that clearly. When someone lies, their prefrontal cortex lights up like a Christmas tree. It's working overtime. And that cognitive load is a weakness we can spot. But then we have the hero of our story, the limbic system. This is the honest brain. It's the ancient primitive part that's been with us for millions of years. It handles our emotions, our survival instincts, and it never ever lies. The limbic system is always on, reacting instantly to the world around us, and its reactions are universal. They are hardwired into our DNA, which is why the body language is it produces is the holy grail for understanding what someone is really feeling. When we feel comfortable, our limbic brain shows it. Our muscle relax, our posture opens up. When we feel stressed or threatened, it signals discomfort. We tense up, we close off, we start doing little things to soothe ourselves, what experts call pacifying behaviors. So when someone is lying, their neurocortex is busy spinning the story, but their limbic system is reacting to the stress of that lie. It sees the deception itself as a threat and starts sending out honest signals of discomfort. Our job is to ignore the words and watch the body. Part 2, the primal survival sequence: freeze, flight, and fight. When our limbic brain senses a threat, it doesn't have time for a debate. It triggers a predictable, hardwired survival sequence: freeze, flight, and fight. Think of it as a strategic plan. First, we freeze. This is the deer in the headlights moment. It's not panic, it's a highly adaptive state of attentive immobility. The goal is twofold. First, to avoid being detected by a predator that's skewed to movement, and second, to give the brain a split second to assess the situation and deceive what to do next. If freezing doesn't work and there's an escape route, the brain triggers flight. The body is flooded with adrenaline, ready to create as much distance from the danger as possible. And if freezing and fleeing have failed, or if we're cornered, the brain defaults to its last resort: fight, confronting the threat head on. This isn't just for physical threats. A tough question in an interview, an accusation from a spouse. These can all trigger the small primal sequence. Part 3, the freeze response: stillness as a superpower. Let's focus on that first response because it's the one most people misunderstand. Freezing isn't just being scared stiff, it's an active, complex survival strategy. Every soldier and SWAT team operator learns that stillness can make you nearly invisible to an enemy. Tactical teams train to master this instinct, using it to hide and assess. The most powerful and tragic proof of this comes from survivors of active shooter events. Many survived by playing dead or remaining absolutely motionless, even when the killer was just feet away. Alaya Eastmont, a survivor of the Parkland shooting, hid under the body of a classmate to survive. In those horrific moments, where fight or flight meant certain death, the freeze response was the only viable path to survival. But this ancient can be a liability. The freeze that saves civilian can be fatal for a police officer who needs to act, and it happens in everyday life too. Ever had your mind go completely blank in a job interview? That's a freeze response. The psychological fear of judgment triggers the same shutdown. A study found that 62% of professionals are frozen in an interview. Subtle signs of this freeze response include holding your breath, or breathing very shallowly, or a sudden stop in blinking as the eye fixate. Part 4. The body's silent language. The freeze response also shows up in specific telltale postures. First, there is what's called the turtle effect. This is when a person's shoulder rise up towards their ears and their head sinks down. It's a subconscious attempt to protect the vulnerable neck and make oneself a small target. It's a massive, flashing sign of insecurity, doubt, and weakness. You see it in people who are unprepared or when they're confronted with something that makes them feel suddenly vulnerable. Another powerful tool is leg locking. The feet are the most honest part of the body because we're least conscious of them. When someone is under stress, especially during questioning, they will often lock their ankle and pull their feet back under their chair, sometimes even wrapping them around the chair legs. This is the limbic brain screaming. It's physically restraining the urge to run away. And it's a clear attempt to withdraw and anchor oneself in the face of a threat. If you see this, the person is experiencing a profound level of internal stress. Part 5. Advanced concepts, connection and control. Okay, let's get to the advanced level. The limbic brain uses two opposing strategies to navigate the social world: connection and control. The tool for connection is called isopraxism or mirroring. This is when we unconsciously imitate the posture, gesture, and even speech patterns of people we like and trust. It's a hardwired behavior that sends a powerful signal. We are alike. We are safe. When you see people in sync like this, you're seeing a strong bond forming in real time. Studies show that waiters who simply repeat a customer's order back to them see a 70% increase in tips. That's the power of isopraxism. It builds trust and rapport. But on the flip side, there's the language of control, aggression without contact. You can be incredibly aggressive without ever laying a hand on someone. These are dominance displays designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Case signs include an intense and broken stare, invading personal space, threatening posture, like puffing out the chest or putting hands on hips to look bigger, and aggressive gesture, like a clenched fist or a pointed finger. These are all signals designed to make the other person yield without a physical fight. Conclusion. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? Your brain is constantly communicating while the neurocortex, the thinking brain, can and will lie. The limbic system, the honest brain, cannot. It reacts truthfully to the world, broadcasting feelings of comfort and discomfort through the body by learning to read this silent language, by understanding the primal sequence of freeze, flight, and fight, and by recognizing the specific tells of discomfort like the turtle effect and leg locking. You gain a superpower. You learn to see the truth behind the words. So the next time you're in a conversation, a negotiation, or just trying to understand someone, remember to look past what you hear. Watch for the story being told by the honest brain. It's the only one you can truly trust. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss out or our next deep dive. Check on the video on the screen to enrich your mind with more nonverbal tricks and tips people use on you in day-to-day life.